Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Pax Historia Creator's Guide. This video is going to be about debugging and improving your preset in general. Let's dive right in. Okay, before we start, I'm going to assume that you either watched the first video and you understand what these are, or you just understand what these are. That being like what all these buttons do, what these fields represent, and basically like the core fundamentals behind how a preset works. If you don't, that's fine. This video will contextualize those, and also you can always check out the first video, whatever you need to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell you about some important things to know about when you're making your preset. So we're going to make one as we go along. So I'm just going to copy the World War II preset here, call it example, and then create a copy. And in here, we're going to start going into the actual details. So the first thing I'm going to cover are regions. Now, in the previous video, I talked about how you can make regions and you can call them whatever you want. But here I'm going to tell you about the importance of the actual names themselves of your regions. So you have to understand fundamentally is that the region names are all being fed to the AI in one massive list. So it's just literally displaying every single region in Russia, every single region in Poland, every single region in Romania, Czechoslovakia, Germany, every single region on the entire map is literally just listed to the AI so it can know how to edit them. So it will know that Ruthenia and Brest-Litovsk are their own regions instead of calling this one section like Eastern Central-ish Poland, because that's not a real region. It's Ruthenia and Brest-Litovsk. Now, the tip actually falls in here when it comes to cities. So some new players might be confused by these region names because they seem inconsistent. For example, you have the city of Moscow, the region of Moscow. It's like, why wouldn't you just call it Moscow and Moscow? Well, first of all, you can't have two regions with the exact same name, obviously. But also, this is how you differentiate to the AI these different kinds of regions. Like it has to know that this region represents the city of Moscow, and this one is the Oblast, I think it's called, or I don't know enough about Russian politics. Same thing here for Kyiv. The point is the region names have to be something that the AI can best understand that also represents the region as a whole. So that's why sometimes you have regions like, Trebizond, that's technically just a city, but this region logically would be enough for the AI to comprehend and understand, oh, it's this general area, and that is Trebizond. You could call it Northeast Turkey, but then again, it's like, well, that's pretty subjective. I mean, this part could also be Northeast Turkey. This part could also be Northeast Turkey. So that leaves more room for vagueness for the AI, which again lowers quality. So think a lot about what your region names are going to be and understand that they're all just going to be fed to the AI in a massive list. So the AI can't actually see a map. This is very important because very often the AI will make region transfer mistakes, which we want to cut down on. Okay, now the next thing you should know about is how these two fields should be worded. Now, I've seen a lot of preset creators, and we also do this ourselves sometimes, is we're framing what we're writing in these fields as like a novel. We're like telling a story about what the lore is in our custom presets if we're making like a historical preset. Or even if you're making like a historical preset, sometimes we describe, like we're telling the story of history. Now, the thing to know about is that that's not actually necessary. Normally, in our testing, at least what we've seen, again, you can always change these and test them yourself, but that costs a lot of tokens testing. But what we've seen is that if you just leave one sentence that says, everything leading up to the start date is historical, if that's what your historical timeline is, then that is the best way to tell the AI, hey, in this preset, the start date is 1935 and everything before that start date was the historical event. It's nice and short. And also this leads us to another fundamental concept is that the longer the prompt gets, the lower quality it's going to be. Now, it really depends on what's making the prompt longer. Some things can cause lower in quality than other things. But the point is, the more words you add, the more the AI has to focus on and process. So it increases the probability that it'll misunderstand or make dumb mistakes, etc. So where I'm going with this is that you have to understand the world before round one field and the simulation rules should be framed and described as if you are describing rules to the AI and you are commanding the AI about how to do this or that. So it's like you're giving out commands instead of telling a story. Now, if you're making a preset that's set in the alt history where the world before round one needs to be the actual lore and history of your alt history, you do have to tell the actual full story. And oftentimes it's much better to describe that as if you are writing a historical textbook. It's like you describe the events that happened, the important notes, the figures to keep track of, whatever you need the AI to be aware of, instead of describing it as if you're writing like a literary novel about this alt history. That drastically improves AI quality. So basically, these two fields should be commanding and descriptive and direct. Try to keep these as short as possible and put only the necessary information, because again, the longer the prompt, the lower the AI quality. But another thing you can put in the simulation rules, especially if you're making just a historical preset, or if you're making a historical preset that you want to debug or lower the chance of mistakes in, you can just put these basic reminders for common mistakes that the AI often makes. So for example, these are the simulation rules for the historical preset of World War II. Well, it describes the game state, and these are descriptions that are specific to World War II. It's like, well, not only, but the point is, in the World War II preset, Russian and Chinese regions are the same as the modern day provinces, oblasts, and administrative divisions of Russia and China. That's an important thing for the AI to know about. It can lower the chances that it makes mistakes in regards to them. Again, more descriptions of regions and how the World War II preset wants the AI to behave, etc., etc. So that's fundamentally something you should be aware of. This is more like an actual bug fix. This is like, if the AI makes common mistakes, you can literally just tell it, hey, this specific kind of mistake is made very often. Trying to avoid it when you are simulating your events. Kind of risky because, again, liabilities, it makes it possible for the AI to completely misunderstand, just be really dumb, and think that what you're telling it to avoid is actually what you're telling it to simulate, or it will think that what you're telling it is like a universal rule when it might be a specific to a country rule, anything like that. However, it's worth trying to figure out how to balance those with your game. There might be some specific errors that just happen so often that those risks are worth it. And if you want to get rid of that one specific error for good, leaving a sentence telling it specifically to never do that will be 99.999% effective. So yeah, that's just another guideline when you're making the simulation rules. So the next thing I want to go over are the tags. Now, in the previous video, I talked about how lots of features can have tags. So map features being the battalions, the cities, or whatever you want the map features to represent. And the two important tags for map features was battalion and city. In the default prompt, the only two map feature tags that matter are battalion and city tags. If you want to understand or learn how to prompt, that's in part 3. But if you're just trying to get a better understanding of how to improve the quality of your presets, all you need to focus on are the battalion and city tags. Any other tags you make won't actually interact with the quality of the AI, but they can be useful for organization. Okay, so to actually go over the tags, you should know that there are tags for regions, there are tags for countries, and there are tags for the map features, which I just told you about. So tags for regions are solely organization based. The reason for this is because the list of regions is long enough. If lots of regions had tags, it would make the prompt even longer and then severely lower AI quality. The point is, any tags you add to the regions are solely for organization. They are not going to affect the AI quality. However, tags added to countries are actually told to the AI, which means if you want to add a tag that says a specific country is, for example, communist, then you could leave that tag and the AI will be aware of the fact that the French Republic has the tag of communist. Now that's useful if you're writing a preset where, it's all history and France is communist before World War II starts. So that extra tag can actually drastically improve AI quality and lower the chance that it makes mistakes. So basically just know that region tags are solely for organization. They are not fed to the AI. Country tags are fed to the AI. They are listed with the country when we list the massive list. It's called the grand map description. Basically, it lists every country in the game, and it lists every region that those countries own and all the tags associated with those countries. Okay, so those are all the features that you should be aware about in the actual preset editor if you want to improve your preset quality. Now let's talk about some important debugging tools which you can use to test your preset or to generally have a better understanding of the game. Now we're going to go over some things you should know about in the actual game, which will not only give you a more fundamental understanding of the game structure, which will directly lead back to your presets being higher quality, but also there are tools that you should be aware of so you can debug your presets and then test them and make sure that they are high quality. If you end up understanding this concept well, you won't have to test your preset as much as anyone else will because you know what to look for when you're testing. You know how to isolate, did the change I made result in a better AI? Well, you'll be able to figure that out much easier and then save your own money. Okay, so now let's talk about some important things regarding the actual map and how a game is fed to the AI. So again, every region is fed to the AI in a massive list, but what's not fed to the AI is every single map feature, and that's like all the cities. However, the battalions in the game are fed to the AI. So for all armies, and again, armies is any map feature with the tag battalion, those are listed to the AI. But for the cities, they are not listed today. The reason for this is because there's literally just way too many of them. The list would be like thousands long, and that would just confuse the AI out of its mind. It wouldn't even understand what it's doing. It would just be like, oh, you gave me a list of cities. Thank you. I mean, not bad, but the point is the longer the prompt, the lower the quality. So just understand that the cities are not going to be fed to the AI. So if you want to optimize for quality by removing cities, it's not going to change anything. Another fundamental thing to know is how the actual countries work. Okay, so in the prompt, and this will be important for you to know about when you're writing your simulation rules and world before round one, is that in the prompt, because it has to be a universally usable prompt, we defined a country as a quote unquote polity. And that basically is like an all-encompassing word that describes, it could be a warlord, a faction, a country, a nation, whatever. That's to cover like every possible preset with every possible country, with every possible time period. If we just use the word country, well, what about all the presets that have like warlords? It doesn't make sense to call a warlord a quote unquote country. That just confuses the AI. So that's the first thing you want to know about. Now, the other thing is the polities or the countries can be dissolved or formed by the AI. Now, this is the root cause of one of the biggest issues is that it will dissolve polities when that polity still exists and owns regions. If it does that, whatever region that polity that got dissolved still owns, those regions will just become unoccupied. So when you're debugging your preset, that's one thing you can look to kind of iron out. But again, it's also just a very important thing to know about is how countries actually work in Pax Historia. Okay, and then the next thing you should know is the advisor. The point of the advisor is to make the game more fun and more guiding. So you kind of have an idea of where you're supposed to go. Because when we give you this massive open-ended actions tab, it can be kind of hard to figure out what actions exactly you want to take. Am I just going to type in something boring like rearm and industrialize? No, I want some specific idea to get. That's what the advisor is for. Where I'm going with this is that the advisor's logs are not actually told to the AI that handles the event simulation. So when you end your turn and it starts generating events, that AI is not aware of anything that is in the advisor's chat history. So just note that if you are making your simulation rules and you tell it like, oh, keep in mind what the advisor has been saying with the player in my preset, well, that sentence is not going to mean anything because the AI that simulates events is not aware of the advisor logs. Again, the reason we did that was just because the longer the prompt, the lower the quality. It just wasn't worth it to list all these massive logs because you'll probably notice the advisor talks a lot. And yeah, that's basically all the in-game mechanics you should be aware about, some rules about the game state. And if you understand all those, you'll be a pretty solid preset editor. Okay, one more thing, and that is the settings right here in the upper left-hand corner. If you're a preset editor and you're testing and debugging your presets, you definitely need to know about most of these. So prompts, that's going to be in part 3. I wouldn't worry about how to edit these if you just want to get to this stage and then be done with it. But again, if you want to and successfully learn prompting, and then you make some good prompts that are specific for your preset, then your preset quality will be like the creme de la creme. It will be the best on the market. But for the sake of this video, I'm not going to go over these in too much detail. The next tab in the settings is the events list. Now, this is basically going to be the history of your actual game. So right now on this game, we've only been on round 1. This logs all the players' actions, the events generated in that round, and then the chats. Now, you don't need to understand how this works in order to be a good preset editor. But again, this is all just for a more fundamental understanding of the gameplay loop if you want to become a really good preset editor. Alrighty, so I'm in a different game now because I wanted to show you the event list in a game when you are actually later in the rounds. So this game is on like round 15, and I was jumping very large distances each time. So that's how the map got so messed up so quickly, is just because I was jumping like years and 6 months. Normally, it would not get this cursed on round 15. But anyways, so here you will see what the event manager actually looks like in the middle of a game. So for each round, it will tell you all the actions, events, and chats initiated in the round. This is a old game. I think I was just testing something, so not much actions, just like 1 per round. So if you're testing and you want to see how the AI behaves or how well it does when you jump forward again, you can actually edit the history inside of your game. So this can be useful for isolating variables, figuring out, oh, maybe there was one specific round that was just done really badly, but you want to see how well your AI does in like the perfect game. That can be very useful for figuring out if the changes you made to try to filter out a specific bug actually worked. Stuff like that. That's part of why we have the event manager. So let's open one of these tabs and you'll see all the actions we took in round 2 and all the events that were generated in round 2. And the first thing to note is that you can delete these from the database whenever you want. Now, be careful because when you delete something, you can't bring it back. So if I wanted to delete these actions, well, in the event history of the prompt, the next time I jump forward, it is not going to be aware of those actions I just deleted anymore. This can also be useful if you're playing mid-game and you're just having a good time. If it makes like one event that's really dumb and it misunderstands something, well, you can just delete that event and then the game will treat it as if that event never happened. So that's one of the uses of the event manager. Now down here, you'll have the consolidator settings. So one of the problems with our game state is that when you make too many rounds, when you get late into a game, there's just way too many events. So each one of these simulations has like 10, 15, sometimes 40 events. And each of these events has a massive text in it. Here's the deal. In the default prompt, every single one of these events, literally all of them, are just listed to the AI. That is the title and the description. So over time, that becomes like tens of thousands of words, and the AI just becomes super confused because in the late game, there's just going to be a list of thousands of events, and it's not even going to know like where the instructions in the prompt were. It's not going to know where the game state of the prompt is. It's just going to see a massive list of events. So how do we fix that? Well, down here, we have the consolidator. And basically how this works is you have a start on round and a chunk size. It takes a specific number of rounds when you get to a specific point of late game, and then it will turn all those rounds into one tiny summary. So instead of all these massive essays worth of events, there's literally 20 of them here, 6 of them here, 7 of them here. It will just show the AI one tiny paragraph, a bit more than a paragraph, but one tiny chunk of text that describes the major events from the specific amount of rounds that were chunked. And that is what the chunk size represents. So basically, there's an AI that will read all the events in a specific number of rounds, and then it will convert all those events into one passage. And then that passage will be fed to the jump forward AI instead of all these events. So that's what this is for. And this works very simply. You can just tell it how many rounds you want it to chunk every single time it makes a consolidation and when you want it to start making those consolidations. So this number represents what round it will start consolidating. So when you hit round 15, it will consolidate rounds 1 through 5 because the chunk size is 5. So it will consolidate rounds 1 through 5 when you hit round 15. And it will continue. When you hit round 20, it will consolidate rounds 6 through 10. When you hit round 25, it will consolidate rounds 10 through 15. So because this game actually got to round 15, it made a consolidation for rounds 1 through 5. So this is the summary that the AI made. So it will feed the jump forward AI this chunk of text instead of all of these like 60 total events, each of them being very, very long. This is something you can experiment with. I'll show on screen how to actually edit these in your preset. You just click on the advanced settings and then change the consolidator settings. Okay, so that's the event manager. And then of course there's a reset to round 1. Very scary. It's going to delete everything and just reset your game entirely. Wouldn't recommend using that, but just make a new game. Okay, so that is the events tab. And then there's this tutorial tab. Again, this is just for very new players. It's very short and simple. We're probably going to change that later. Don't worry about it. And then there's the cheats tab. This can also be useful if you're a preset editor and you want to test your specific preset in like, say, a specific geopolitical situation where you want the map in a specific way, and then you want to test the AI's ability to react to a world with that map. Well, you would just use this tool to set up the minor nuances that you want to check for, and then test the AI and see if the AI is smart enough to handle those nuances. That's one of the reasons why we have a cheat menu. It's also just fun if you want to use it mid-game to correct any mistakes that the AI might make. So yeah, pretty straightforward. You should know what all these fields are from the first video. Okay, and then these next tabs, we have report bug, create benchmark, and then these two. So report bug, hopefully you know what this is by now, but if you don't, if you find a bug in the middle of your preset or in the middle of any game, just send us a bug report. Okay, and then next we have create benchmark. So I wouldn't worry about this. So don't worry about this tab unless you want to focus on prompting. Okay, and then these two are just vanities. So full screen, pretty straightforward. It just makes it full screen. And then the 3D globe, which is slow, laggy. There's not much that preset editors can do about the globe. It is what it is. So figured I should just describe what those are. And then we have the wiki and Discord. So yeah, those are all the tabs in the settings, described in detail. So that is about it for the fundamental gameplay loop and the game mechanics. Again, this video is more about getting a better understanding of how the gameplay mechanics work. Now, if you just came here to get a slightly better understanding of how presets work, you can stop now, but I strongly recommend you at least go a little bit into prompting because it can make your presets just so much better. So yeah, I'll see you in part 3.